we'll go ahead and get our program started. I know that we have some folks that are still joining us at this time, but I want to make sure that we're able to keep everybody on schedule and on time. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Colin Hastings. I'm the Executive Director of the Pasco Chamber of Commerce. And we're proud today with this virtual August General Membership Luncheon to have Michelle Whitney, who's the Superintendent of the Pasco Public School District. She's going to be our keynote speaker. I do have, want to take a moment out to introduce some folks too, and to, here, I'm trying to share a screen here. All right. I want to thank the support that we've had during these challenging times. You know, this production would not be possible without the great support of STCU, which, by the way, has opened a new branch on Road 68. I won't take all the thunder away, but you're going to see them operating really, really soon. Also want to thank Port of Pasco and Randy Hayden and the Port Commissioners for their support for this event, as well as Mike Miller over at Moon Security, the team at Tippett Company. You know, it's Bob Tippett and Charles Laird and Kurt Schaefer, Kevin Williams at IFC Insurance, Jason Hogue, American Family on Road 68, as well as the Ray Family LLC, Ed and Ann Ray, of course, Ed Ray, the godfather of the Pasco Chamber, for their generous support. Also, many of you on this meeting sponsored today's event by just, even though the event is free, we asked for those that were willing to pay their normal sort of luncheon dues to the event would be recognized during the event. So I want to thank you for that. The same sponsorship packages will also be available for our annual Sunshine Luncheon, which is next month. Likely will be, it will likely be virtual again. I'm hoping not, fingers crossed, but that's just kind of the time that we're living in right now. I did want to take a moment to introduce elected officials that I know that are planning on joining us today. We have from the Washington State House of Representatives, first from the 9th District is Mary Dye, and then the 16th District, we have Representative Bill Jankin. Franklin County Commissioner Bob Cook has joined us. Pasco Mayor Saul Martinez, and Port of Pasco Commissioner Gene Reichman. Thank you so much for joining us today. I see we have a large crowd today, and appreciate everyone joining us and participating in this new way of getting together. So I hope everyone is handling COVID situation as best as they can. You know, with the downtime for many folks, I've noticed that people have kind of shifted their lifestyles. Some began exercising more, and maybe they learned to cook, or even some people are learning a new language. So since the start of COVID, you can see I've been accomplishing more facial hair growth. Which is kind of one of those things that started as a joke, and who would have thought 5 months later, here we are. But you know, once I'm down this path, why stop now? I don't know. At some point, I'm sure my wife will tell me it's time to stop. So I know there's some businesses and employees really struggling out there with all these new regulations. You know, I think the reality is some of these businesses we'll never see again. I'm happy for those entrepreneurs that have weathered the storm and have been creative with their business models to capitalize on this new normal. I hope when we look back on this pandemic, we learn or are better prepared once and if we face this ever again. I think there's been a lot of strife and struggle out there, and really hope that we come out of this much stronger once it's all done. On that note, you know, the Pasco Chamber has been heavily impacted by COVID. We're not alone with that. Our support staff has been laid off since the end of March, and we don't qualify since we're a 501c6 for the PPP, but we've been efforting in a lot of different areas to seek revenue, and I think we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. You know, since March, we've missed out on over $50,000 in budgeted revenue. And the next 4 months, hundreds of thousands of dollars are of projected revenue is at risk, because so much of what we do is centered around large gatherings. And so one of those large gatherings that we have scheduled coming up October 10th is Riverfest over in Columbia Park. It's been a really good event where the last few years we've had thousands of people attend that to learn more about our hydropower system. Well, I think how things are looking is we're not going to have Riverfest as we know it. So we're pivoting to a new platform so that we can still do all the great things that Riverfest does. One of the things that we're going to be doing is having a virtual Riverfest supported by a targeted advertising campaign that will be touting the importance of our river system, steering us to that virtual Riverfest. We're also developing an educational component so that some of the Riverfest, it would be like a virtual field tour, field trip that maybe the local school districts can integrate in their virtual online learning, as we'll probably hear a little bit more about in a short while. But so always some great things to look forward to as to how we cope with this, and we have to think outside of the box a lot. We're really excited. The steering committee for the Riverfest has done yeoman's work just to put everything together so that we can really have an impact, and maybe even a bigger impact than we normally would have by having Riverfest at Columbia Park. So stay tuned for that, and we have a lot of partners we need to communicate with, but you'll see that in the end of or at the beginning of October. So that concludes my little introduction. Again, thank everyone for joining. We'll have a community spotlight by Randy Hayden, and then we'll hand it over to our sponsor to share a few words, and then introduce our keynote speaker. At the end of the keynote speaking, Michelle's keynote, we will have an opportunity for question and answer. Please utilize your chat function to put your questions in there. We'll be monitoring that. I think Michelle will be able to see that, but we'll also jump in and be able to share some of those, and we'll wrap up at 1 o'clock. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Randy Hayden, who's going to unmute himself and share a little community spotlight as to what's going on with the port. Thanks, Randy.
Yes, well, thank you, Colin. It's good to be with you today and everybody else. I think, like many of you, one of the things I really miss is getting to see all of you and our other partners in the community. So just want to thank Colin, thanks to Chamber for putting this online Zoom meeting together. At least we get to see some of our faces together. Well, as many of you know, the Port of Pasco's mission is to support economic development. And we do this through things like developing industrial property, operating the Tri-Cities Airport, and leasing industrial space to businesses. One of our newer tools to help with economic development is through workforce development. And the good news is that future of that workforce is already here at Pasco High, Chiawana, CBC, WSU Tri-Cities, and the other schools in our area. And our port commissioners recognize that incredible talent base in our community and decided last year to add workforce development as one of the key goals of our strategic plan. So to those ends, we've been working with Michelle at the Pasco School District, Rebecca Woods at CBC, and Deb Bowen at the Mid-Columbia STEM Network to find ways to connect businesses at the port with our high school and higher ed students to provide a direct connection between our employers and our employees, future employees. So at the port, we've already begun a summer intern program for college students to learn about working at the port. We've led tours at the port for local high school students so they can see what a port does, along with some of the businesses that are located at the port. We're also in the planning stages of setting up a career fair at Pasco high schools and a teacher in the workplace program. Somewhat slowed by the realities of COVID, but we'll get there. I just want to close by saying that Michelle has really been a great advocate for preparing kids for life after high school, and the Port of Pasco is excited to partner with her and the Pasco School District on making sure all of our kids have further education and work opportunities once they graduate. Thank you, Colin.
Thanks, Randy. Appreciate the message there. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Euron Mendoza from STCU. He is the branch manager on that Road 68 location I was telling you about. But I'm going to hand it over to him. He's got a few words to share, and then he's going to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Randy. Buenas tardes, everyone. I'm Ubron Mendoza, the branch manager for the STCU newest location on Road 68 in Pasco. It's been a long time since March. I know that I have been eagerly and sometimes patiently waiting for my branch to open. Our doors are now open and ready to serve our community. Today, we will be discussing a challenging topic, and that's back to school. There are so many different elements to virtual learning for our students and our families, but as a credit union founded by educators, STCU has been a partner to the school districts, and we know how resilient, progressive, and committed they are to every student. We stand ready and will walk alongside our districts and our students, our families, our employees, our communities, and our members as they all navigate through this continued COVID crisis. STCU is hopeful that we can set a good example on how to be flexible for our working parents, and we are confident that the back to school in-person plans our school districts have in place will be ready to act upon when it is safe and appropriate. We are glad to be partnered in today's topic. The timing and relevance could not be more important. Thank you to the Pasco Chamber of Commerce for providing a platform for this important update. STCU is happy to be included. Today, I am honored to introduce our speaker, Pasco Superintendent Michelle Whitney. Somos Pasco. Michelle Whitney has been a part of the Pasco School District for more than 25 years, starting out as a kindergarten teacher before moving on to serve an assistant principal and then a principal at McLaughlin Middle School. She's also served as a director of human resources and executive director of teaching and learning and deputy superintendent. In July 2016, Michelle was sworn in as Pasco School District superintendent. This year, Michelle is embarking on her 5th year as superintendent, overseeing a school district with more than 2,000 employees who serve more than 19,000 students in our community. Ms. Whitney is proud product of Columbia Basin College, where she received her associate's degree before moving on to Washington State University to earn her bachelor's and master's degree in education. She also received her principal certification and superintendent's credentials from WSU. Michelle Whitney.
Well, thank you so much. It is my honor to be here with you and to share a little information about how we're planning to educate students during truly these remarkable times. I joke a little bit, it's like what a year the last few months have been. Certainly you all have been experiencing it as well. If anyone would have told me that a pandemic was possible, I would have just laughed. I really would like to go back to the days where the hardest decision I had to make was whether or not we were going to go to school on time or cancel because of snow and ice. That used to be my biggest, I'd wring my hands all night, stay up and worry. Gosh, if we could just go back to life when simple and all we were worried about is snow and ice. So it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I am just going to run through a little bit of a presentation for you and then happy to answer questions. We have in Pasco School District really been thinking about the reopening of our schools on a continuum of instructional delivery models. So we wanted to be prepared for all contingencies because what we learned in this pandemic is that things change rapidly and the landscape shifts really with no warning. So we want to build a resilient school district that regardless of the circumstances in our community around COVID, that we have options. And we're thinking about the options on a continuum of most restrictive to least restrictive. Most restrictive is at-home learning, and we're calling it at-home learning 2.0 because we learned a lot from the crisis closure and the instructional delivery that was provided in that environment. We learned a lot from our teachers, from our students and our families about how that needed to be different in the fall. So at-home learning 2.0 is really the most restrictive on our instructional delivery continuum, and it's really based on what the community health conditions are. Blended learning is in the middle, and that provides an opportunity for some of our students to be on campus and some of our students to be at home. What influences that, again, is our community health conditions and also the mandates that are required of us from state and local health department. And the big caveat here is 6-foot social distancing is required, which for us eliminates our ability to bring all of our students back at one time. So we can have half of our students on campus at a time and maintain that 6-foot social distancing. So that's where blended learning comes in. Half of our students would be on campus receiving in-person, face-to-face instruction. Half of our students would be at home, and it would happen on a rotation schedule. So that's our blended learning approach. And then the least restrictive is that the traditional face-to-face instruction that we all know and love, and that is really in our hearts and the core of our business. We deeply collaborated with our community, with our staff, and the question that we asked is, what do you need from us in the face of this pandemic to be providing exceptional service for you and your family, or you as an employee? And with those questions, we rose some guiding principles that have been framing our reopening planning. First and foremost, this is a public health crisis that has really compelled us to lead from a place of compassion, communication, common sense, and collaboration. We have had a number of different venues for collaboration. We literally have had thousands, like 3,600 people participating in surveys. We had focus groups where there were 1,000 participants. We've had town hall meetings with almost 300 people. We've had staff meetings with 1,200 participants. So we really have been embraced the concept of collaboration. All of what we're learning in the face of this pandemic, we learn together. They did not teach me in superintendent school how to lead you through a pandemic in the educational environment. So we absolutely have to lean on our partners in the community and make sense of this environment together. We lean on our Washington Department of Health to help us understand those requirements that are going to keep us safe and healthy in the face of this pandemic. And we also lean on the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, who provides us instructional requirements through this pandemic as well. One of the big guiding principles that surfaced for us was the need to ensure that there's equitable access to technology and materials and instruction that align with who we are. We have 5 outrageous outcomes. They're 100% goals. And even in the face of this pandemic, we still believe in that 100% and our responsibility against that goal, even in these very uncertain and unique times. And then we also are planning around training and support for families to maximize whatever the learning model that we're in. So specific to our at-home learning model, we learned from our collaborators that we really still needed to make sure that we were providing social emotional learning supports that actually became even more important during these uncertain times, that we don't lose sight of those social emotional needs of both our employees and our students and their families. There was a need to focus on ensuring consistency so that every student's experience was similar across the system, to increase accountability for employees, for students, and for parents, and then to build a model that is user-friendly. We recognize that in the spring, the crisis deployment of an educational approach was very, there was a lot of variety. And so if you were a parent who had multiple students in your house, you could be navigating, if you had 5 students, you could be navigating 5 different ways of doing business. So we heard loud and clear from our families that we needed to build a model that was user-friendly and, again, consistent, and then to really focus on removing barriers to access, especially for our most vulnerable youth and families. Some specific guiding principles that surfaced for our blended learning model is again to lead with social emotional learning and really think about those times when students are in person as being times when you're building community and attending to those social emotional needs. And then incorporate face-to-face instruction while adhering to those health and safety requirements. We absolutely want all of our kids back every day face-to-face. That is who we are. It's what's in our hearts. The local context around community health is requiring us to adhere to some mandates that make that look different. So we need to make sure that we're doing the business of in-person education in a way that is aligned with our public health requirements. And then really being mindful of the needs of our students in specialized programs. If it's special education services, our two-way dual language, our high cap, et cetera, We want to make sure that regardless of the environment, whether it's at home, blended, or in person, that our students' needs are still being met. So you might be wondering, okay, so I hear you're saying you have this continuum that allows you to be flexible and nimble across these 3 different ways of instructing our students. Well, how do you make decisions about where we land on that continuum? Washington State Department of Health has released a framework for helping school district administrators partner with their local health departments in deciding what model of instruction we should be using. It's called the School Decision Tree Framework, and it has really kind of 3 big buckets of guidance. There's a metric for us having collaborative conversations with our local public health around what our community spread looks like. And it's not a single metric, that's a multiple metric in that regard. And then depending on what those metrics say, it recommends different health measures and then monitoring and response strategies, kind of depending on where our local health data is landing. Based on that when our approach to making a decision for the first day of school started, Washington Department of Health was not quite done with their framework. Since then, they have finalized it and released it publicly. But even before it was released, our local health officer, Dr. Amy Pearson, she released a recommendation to us as school district superintendents that talked about, at the time on July 28th, when she released this recommendation, that at that point, Franklin County was experiencing over 616 cases per 100,000. None of the metrics being considered by Washington State at that point would allow us to open with in-person education with 616 people or cases per 100,000. So Dr. Amy Persons proactively released a recommendation to us that basically stated that, recognizing school districts plays a critical role in providing for needs like social emotional development and learning supports. But there was a need to balance that with the public health condition. So at that point, she was recommending that we not start school on September 1st with in-person instruction, but that we think about how we open with most of our students in an online learning environment, and then also think about how we would serve students in groups of 5 or fewer that were meeting the definition of kind of educationally at risk. So you think about those students whose program really can't be delivered online, that we should really be thinking about how do we bring them back in small groups to be able to provide educational services for them. So that recommendation was provided to us on July 28th. The following Tuesday, August 3rd, our board acted on that recommendation and a recommendation from Washington Schools Risk Management. So that's our insurance carrier, basically stating that if you have the kind of recommendation that we had from our local health department, that our insurance carrier was really compelling us to follow that recommendation. Otherwise, it could be a risk of liability and exposure to the district and then ultimately the community. So based on those 2 pieces, our board unanimously supported our opening on in-person education. They unanimously supported the recommendation because they understood that the health recommendation and the insurance recommendation really provided a compelling why for starting on in-person education, not because they don't believe in in-person education. We all know that in-person education is what we want to get back to as quickly as we can. If you think about it in terms of the spring, in the spring, the governor closed schools and it was like a switch. As of Monday night, you click our closing school. Bringing our students back and our employees back will not be a switch. It will be a dial. And we will dial up in-person education at the same time as the public health condition is dialing down. Fewer COVID cases, more in-person education. So we're thinking about our approach forward as a dial, not a switch. So you can see by my fancy graphic that I did myself, I just really want to point that out, that we are just starting to enter into that blended learning environment because we are considering how we bring back those small groups of students that are determined to be educationally at risk. You might be saying, okay, so we hear you saying that the online experience will be different from what we experienced in the spring to the fall. And I'll just highlight some of those areas. So in the spring, like I said, you got a variety of platforms for you. Some of you that are parents that have multiple kids, you would have, teachers doing all kinds of different things to communicate with you and to turn assignments in. We have standardized those platforms to a handful. We call them the core four. And we are actually in the process of developing parent trainings so that you would get little snippets of video that are like, here's how you access the teams and what does that look like. In the spring, the district developed lessons and deployed them, and teachers supported those lessons. In the fall, we're going back to written teacher delivered lessons based on our district adopted materials. In the spring, our middle school and high school students had devices, so they went home with devices, and then we phased in device deployment for our younger students. We will be proactively launching a district device program that will allow every student in Pasco School District to have a device. Some of you that have multiple students may have remembered that in the spring we gave one device per household. It was really to make sure that we had enough devices for every household to have at least one. What we learned in the over our focus groups is that did not work for families. Families needed more devices than just one. So my technology department was amazing and creative, and we do have enough devices that every student in Pasco School District will have a device to use at home. In the spring, we were mandated by OSPI around grading, and it really limited our ability to grade students. In the fall, we will go back to our priority standards, grading students up against our priority standards and students. So it'll be like more of a typical grading that you're used to. In the spring, we gave feedback. In the fall, we'll be doing assessments just like regular school. In the spring, it was up to individual teachers to decide how parents would access them. In the fall, based on parent input, there will be standard times when teachers are available for office hours that'll be published and consistent, so parents know this is the chunk of time when I'll be able to get a one-on-one or face-to-face with my child's teacher if I need help or support. And then in the spring, based on the nature of the closure, it was a crisis, so we were very reactive in addressing training needs. In the fall, we're more proactive. Over 400 of our students or our teachers have already gotten training. We're prepared to deliver training prior to school starting for the rest of our teachers for how to teach online. We're, like I said, developing those trainings for parents, etc. So we really did listen to those that were in service to improve the spring experience to make it better in the fall. So what does that mean for students? Every student will be getting a laptop. Instruction will start on September 1st online. Daily attendance will be taken, and students will be graded on their assignments and assessments. Instruction will be delivered a couple of different ways. One, through what's called synchronous. So we're both on the line at the same time, much like this, and we're together getting instruction. There'll be other times when students have been given videos or materials that they'll be doing independently, and that's asynchronous. So they'll pull up like a video, they'll have a lesson, they'll be able to work through an assignment that's given. So it'll be a combination of both. Again, as the public health condition improves, we'll be dialing up more and more in-person education really as quickly as we can, because our goal is to get kids back in our classrooms. Students, and I talked about this again, students who are educationally at risk, we're looking at how we might serve them. And I have a focus group of our employees right now looking at how would we get this piece of our educational delivery kind of spun up and starting to move forward. So they're working on a plan for that right now. So what does that mean for families? So families really have a couple different options. One, they can engage in this blended learning model at their site, where they'll be on a roster, a teacher of record, just like you're assigned to a classroom at the beginning of a normal school year. That teacher will be interfacing through these synchronous learning opportunities and through asynchronous learning opportunities once we can do at home. And they'll be kind of experiencing this journey with us, where we're moving across that continuum of blended learning to more traditional face-to-face learning and so on. That experience is what every Pasco family who is registered at their home school will get. Parents do have an opportunity to opt in to our iPal environment. We have had an Internet Learning Academy in Pasco School District for 13 years. So this is not new as a district at all. The teachers that are attached to iPal have been doing this again for 13 years. They're very practiced at it. We are adding some additional components, not only because of this COVID environment. It actually was a happy accident. We were looking at how to expand these services anyway. This created some urgency in moving up that timeline. But we do have some options for families who would rather engage in a more at-home environment where you're not going to have to worry about kind of that dial. You know, if the unpredictable nature of that dial is uncomfortable for you as a family, you can opt into this iPal environment, and that's consistent. You can stay in it the whole year. Or you could go back to your home school when you felt like you were ready. So we have some, the K2, we do have some, it's more of a kit base. So you would get a kit of materials that are hands-on for families that aren't as interested in things being online. We also have a grades 3 through 12 educational environment that has core classes. There's some limited electives for grades 6 through 12. There are no electives for grades K5 in that virtual environment. And then weekly, there'll be a teacher that's checking in with students and families to make sure that they're progressing across the learning plan. The new piece that we're offering is this K5 virtual environment, and it'll offer 4 core classes: math, science, ELA, and social studies. And it's a total online environment. And it does have a more robust offering of electives than the grade 3 through 12 option that I just mentioned before. The difference in these options is just the educational platform that's being used. So families get the opportunity to go on, interface with the educational platform. And then some of them, like, oh, I like Edgenuity, but I don't like Odyssey. And that's how parents would make a decision which one works best for them. Families who choose to engage in our environment at where they're with their boundary school, the blended learning, these are the applications that'll be used. Zoom would be the application that we use for meetings. Students will be storing their files on OneDrive. They'll Stream and Flipgrid are the platforms that parents would need to know about how to access video. And then teachers would be communicating with parents on Class Dojo or Teams. So it's a very narrow menu of applications for parents to learn, and it's consistent. So regardless if you have a kindergartner, a 3rd grader, a 9th grader, and a 12th grader, these are the platforms that you'll have to learn, not a different one for every one of the kids that are living in your home. So families, we are planning to offer support for families who are having barriers to accessing reliable internet service. So we have kind of a layered approach to that, whether it's helping families access some of the offers that are currently offered through our internet providers. We're even looking at partnerships where perhaps we buy the infrastructure to put an internet router at some of our more high density housing, and then looking for partnerships that may help pay for the internet service. So we're looking at all kinds of different options, but our goal is for 100% of our students to have access to reliable internet. It becomes more complicated for our students who live in places where there is no internet service. It's a very small percentage of our students that's the case. And then parents can expect to get a schedule noting when the instructional times are happening and when they have access to their child's teachers. For employees, we have designated job functions in partnerships with our employees, making sure that it's relevant to whatever the instructional delivery model is. Employees will be engaged in meaningful work that is aligning with our values and mission. And as always, whenever there's a change in working conditions, we'll be partnering with our labor partners through a collective bargaining process, which is required by law, and we're happy to collaborate and interface with our labor partners in that way. We will be offering accommodations for our employees who meet the Center of Disease Control a definition of high risk. And then we're planning for, thank you, our employees to be working from their classrooms or their work sites as much as possible. And we are making plans to modify work environments or work schedules for times when that's not possible. So we do have some work environments, for example, where the office space isn't conducive to getting people 6 feet apart and so on. So we'll need to make appropriate accommodations for employee health and safety. So with that, we are Pasco. I have been proud to be a member of Pasco School District since the minute I walked into my student teaching at McGee Elementary. And then when I set up my first classroom at Captain Gray as a kindergarten teacher, I've been proud to carry the title of a Pasco School District educator every moment since then. And in these moments of this pandemic and the uncertainty that the spring and now into the fall has created, that pride is elevated even more as I've seen our community lean in as support. I 100% recognize that this environment has created a lot of uncertainty and that there's a lot of different perspectives about how we might move through this. What I know about our community is that when there's things that are hard, we lean into it together and we move through it together. So I'm proud to be a part of that, and I'm proud to be of support. So, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Good. We did receive some questions, and I'll start with one, but in the meantime, feel free if you have any questions to put it on the chat sort of function. The one question I don't think that you saw, Michelle, and I'll ask it on behalf of one of the patrons, is with Pasco lacking facilities to keep up with the population growth, i.e. classroom size issues, what are some of the ideas implemented because of the pandemic that might be adopted on a permanent basis to help with delivering education in the future, I suppose?
That's a great question. So I don't know that my answer is going to be specific just to facilities, but I think one of the things I've learned through this pandemic is the power of virtual meetings. So for example, I had 190 people on a town hall call. I've never had 190 people show up to a community meeting after work. So I think thinking about community engagement differently in terms of that balance between in-person community engagement, which, don't get me wrong, I'm an in-person person. Like, I want to hug you, I want to shake your hand, I want to be in a room with you. So for me, virtual will never replace that. But I think maintaining some of this virtual engagement with the community, even post-COVID, is such a nice opportunity for people to be able to be engaged in a way that they wouldn't otherwise. So for example, I do community coffees, and I go and I sit at Starbucks in the morning for a couple hours, and people come in and we visit. But there are just some people that isn't going to work for them in their schedule. So could I host a virtual coffee hour where I'm available, or coffee hours where I'm available for a few hours in the morning, where someone who's working might not be able to drive all the way to Starbucks, but might be able to pop in and just talk to me for 15 minutes. So I think that the community engagement in a virtual environment, and again, not to replace in-person or face-to-face interactions, but to enhance that, I think is really important. I also think that it has compelled us to look at our virtual offerings for families differently, and really to create a more robust offering through IPAL. We've had a solid program through IPAL for, again, the last 13 years, but there has been a request in our community for us to do things more like the Richland HomeLink you may have heard of, and we have heard that request. In the face of this pandemic, it has given us the urgency to really prioritize that request. And so I think there's things like that we've moved up on the priority list, or fast-tracked, turned up the speed and implementation in the face of this pandemic that, again, were priorities for us, but we just weren't in a position to be moving as quickly as maybe we have in the face of the pandemic. So I'm not sure that hit your question, but those are a couple of the things that came to the top of my head.
Next question. Well, I know Mike Miller had a question regarding broadband, and I think he covered that right after you went to that slide. But a couple other questions. One from Delta is, what does Pasco School District see for sports? And then I'll add on to that from Myra. What will there be additional resources available, specifically maybe counseling for students to get them through this?
Yeah, so WIAA has been super proactive and super, I'm going to use the word clean in the way that they've been thinking about implementation of sports. So right away, WIAA made the decision to tie their decision-making around athletics to the governor's phases. And so as the governor's phases have changed, WIAA would update their guidance, and they have a really nice set of tools on their website. So basically our stance is that in terms of athletics, we'll follow the WIAA guidance. And as of right now, there will be no athletics or athletic contests in phases 1 or 1.5. And then you may know that WIAA did some shifting of the way the sports seasons are scheduled. So like the fall football is now in the spring, which, there's a lot of controversy about that. I'm not going to lie. That wasn't necessarily a super popular decision, but that's the decision that WIAA made. And in some ways, if you just think about it from a sheer like touching people standpoint, it makes sense. So like I said, we'll be following WIAA's guidance and their rules, and they've been very proactive and very thoughtful, and their guidance is super clean. So while we're in phase 1, 1.5, there are no athletics. We are continuing with activities and clubs that can be done online, however. And one of the things that's really important to us is that we're empowering our student leaders to reach out to their friends and make sure that there's a way for peers to support one another, which is a nice segue into your next question. One of the things that was really important to me from the very beginning of the COVID closure was, in my head, I heard what Governor Inslee said, that to keep people safe, we needed to send kids home. But my heart broke a little on the inside, because I knew that there's kids that come to us for that safety and security. And so it was really important to me that right away we built out a really robust system to identify who those kids were and provide supports for them. So right away, we identified 1,500 of our most vulnerable youth, our kids that are homeless, migrant, in foster care, et cetera. And we built some partnerships with community and schools, our home visitors, et cetera. And we basically case managed those families in small groups. So we took a small group and assigned them to an adult, a Pasco School District employee whose job it is to make contact and meet their needs. So that happened all spring, all summer, and we will continue that in the fall. We also developed a hotline where people that needed us could call in, and like a hotline on the surface, like you're like, yeah, everyone can do an automated message. The cool part about us was in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Russian, so that's cool. The other thing was there was a place where you could leave a message and a human being would call you back. So we got a lot of people who self-identified themselves as needing us, and then we were able to add them to the case management system. We also created a online form for principals to refer families that needed us. And then now in the spring, we just met with our home visitors, our behavior intervention specialists, and our counselors and our nurses in a focus group that was completely focused on meeting the needs of our most vulnerable youth. And so each of those employee groups has a work function now identified. So for example, counselors will be doing online lessons with kids. Home visitors will be engaging in kind of people finding when teachers can't make contact. Then they take the kid's name to the counselor or the home visitor, who will then work through trying to make sure that those families are engaged. So we built out a system to support those that need us the most. And each of the job functions now has a very articulated set of expectations for them to be engaged and involved in the fall. So we're excited about that layered system, and we feel like it will be robust in meeting the needs of our most vulnerable youth and families.
Thanks, Michelle. Another question sent out. I think it's a good question. Will there be a resource center the families that are limited with technology can call to ask questions to make sure their children are able to get started on time?
So the resource center for our families is number one, is their school. Our buildings are not closed. They weren't closed. They were closed to people being in them. Our buildings are not closed in terms of service and support. So families should completely be encouraged to reach out. Building principal is their number one contact, and our building principals are working. So they should be able to call their school and get the support that they need. We did open up our technology. Internal to Pasco School District, we've had 6710 for decades and decades. It's like the number you call when your computer's not working. Right away, our technology department opened that line up to the entire community. So if it's a technology specific question, parents call 543-6710 and they get a person that can help walk through technology issues. But the number one place where families should go is their building school and start, or the building, their home school, and start with their building principal. And they have layers of support to help any family that needs help. And once the principal's toolbox is empty, the principal knows how to access those of us at the district who can add some additional tools to the table. So tell families, call the principal, and that's the first place to start in getting help and support.
Good. I might have my parents call you when they have computer issues.
I think it's 543, right, Shane? 700?
Yeah, they call me Geek Squad, so I'm help out. So we'll end on this, and this isn't so much a question, but probably a statement where I think most everyone on this meeting would agree with, but it was sent privately, but it comes from a person that says, "I'm Michelle's biggest fan, and I'm so proud to have her lead our schools. We realize all the work that she and her staff has done and appreciate it very much." So I think that I knew that would get you, but,
Wow.
so that was very nice for people that had that. And so it looks like Saul Martinez, I just got a note. Mr. Mayor, you had something that you wanted to say? You can go ahead and unmute and jump in.
Okay, can you hear me, Michelle?
Yes.
Hey, well, I just want to let you know that appreciate all the hard work. I've seen you ever since I was on the school board, and I'm your biggest fan. So Go Bulldogs and go Pasco Pride, right? I listened to the school board meeting. Yeah, I listened to the school board meeting that was recorded as I was on my way home one night, and just find very interesting that many people don't understand, and even us sometimes as local officials and leaders, we have questions that we don't quite understand, and it's so hard to answer. And one of those, and I appreciate Steve on the school board very much, because he was able to get to the point. And a lot of the decisions that are made are not decisions that we can make upright, that we can make and say it's going to be done this way, because even as leaders, we don't always know what the consequences are going to be if we don't follow guidelines. And we have our resources, like the health districts and the governor's help that we go to and try to, and I hope, for lack of a better word, negotiate or come to terms and try to help our officials and our leaders understand where our issues are and where we face them, and how we can best open up our businesses and our community to do it safely and be acceptable. Because the bottom line is the buck stops at the governor. And we do the best we can to try to just provide the information so that we can open up to where our citizens feel comfortable and are safe doing so. And I appreciate, again, Steve's comments and trying to get to the point. And I felt like you were being targeted, or, and that's your job. And you do such a wonderful job in answering the questions and realizing that there's no answer sometimes. But the buck does stop, at our governor. And we have to ensure that we use our resources. And I know that you are doing what you absolutely have to be doing to make our community safe and to do it as efficiently as possible, realizing that we not only have parents to work with, but our teachers and our are adults that can sometimes be just as difficult, as we all know. So, and I'll just say it because we're all the same. We all want what's best for, you know, us and our friends and our families. But again, I just appreciate all the work you guys have done, and I hope that you continue to stay strong and we move forward and provide each and every family the opportunity to have a resource to go to, because I will tell you, you know, everybody has different skills that they can tap into as far as technology goes, and also the resources available when both parents are working, you know, whether it be professional jobs or essential jobs out in agriculture industry. So thank you very much. Continue to do what you're doing. I am behind you, and I know a lot of us are behind you 100%. So thank you once again for joining us and giving us this presentation, and keep going. Thank you very much. Go Pasco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colin, if I could just real quick, I just wanted to, and I can't believe I forgot to highlight it. One of the things that we're very cognizant of is the impact to families and employers around this model of educating students. And so we are partnering with Boys and Girls Club to look at options for supporting with childcare services, and not that Pasco School District teachers or employees would be providing it, but that our facilities would be used to provide it. And then what kinds of supports could we offer? So just as those of you who employ people know that we're working on that. And then also for our own employees where childcare is also an issue. And then we're also really in the infancy stages about thinking about this idea of kind of a drop-in virtual center where students and families that it just really is a hardship to try to do the at-home learning from home would at least have a drop-in center where they could go. So we have not forgotten about that part of this decision-making, that impact to families. So, and then those of you who are employers know that we really are leaning into that. Matter of fact, I have a meeting tomorrow morning to try to finalize some plans with Boys and Girls Club. And then there was also some thought around, you know, providing those times when teachers are available for office hours for those of you who are employers. If we would ask flexibility in your employment to allow parents to access during that time, so that it was one time a day, so that parents weren't getting interrupted at various times of the day. So we really are trying to be thoughtful about that and be good partners with our employers in the face of this, you know, very, very complicated set of decisions. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Michelle, and a lot of love on the comments. So we want to extend that to you, and we want to thank everyone for participating in our virtual lunch today. Of course, we want to thank SDCU. If you missed it, they opened their branch today, Road 68. So Ubron is extremely busy, but we're happy that he took some time out to help host and introduce Michelle today, as well as all of our other participants today. Really appreciate that. A few notes before we conclude our meeting. Franklin County Commission and Franklin County has $3 million in CARES Act funding that TRIDEC is taking applications for. So if you haven't had a chance to, your business is in need, there's some funding out there for small businesses. So if you go to tridec.org, you'll be able to see your business has to be located in Franklin County to be eligible for these funds, and it's based on a lottery, but encourage those businesses to, if they are in need, to jump in and fill in that application. I mentioned before too that our annual Sunshine Luncheon is coming up next month, and that's in the years past, and I expect in the future will be presented by GISA Credit Union. So thank you, GISA. We're going to have a keynote from Steve Lurch, who is the chief economist with the Washington State Economic and Revenue Forecast Council. That'll be a very interesting topic. Obviously, COVID has had an impact economically in our state, as well as funding for operations of our government. And we'll also be doing our normal sort of program where we honor those board members that are coming off the board, or also maybe some new board members too. I'll take a moment here just because the board has discussed with the COVID situation where we normally have elections, and we're going to modify the elections this year. So stay tuned for some more information on that as our board turns over in September. A reminder too, PSC-TV is recording this. And so if you missed a portion of this, you can go to your charter, local charter channel. I think it's 191. And see the broadcast of this. We also did record this as well too, and we'll hopefully be able to find that on the web here very shortly. So thanks again for everyone that participated, and look forward to seeing you next month. With that concludes our meeting. Have a great day. Enjoy the sunshine, and we are Pasco, right, Michelle?